What's going on, guys? We're back for more Eddie Brock Carnage with issue 3. And Eddie's getting a little bit unhinged in this one. Just a little bit, but also we find out that someone who was believed to have been dead is getting ready to be another potential host for the Carnage symbiote. And I can't wait to hear what you guys think in the comments. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, do be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, this picks up after what we saw with Eddie Brock Carnage going after Bushwhacker at the Detroit, Michigan 3rd Precinct. And mainly because Bushwhacker was on the ambitious hit list that Carnage had made, with Carnage wanting Eddie to go after more substantial targets, many of whom Carnage is considering to be his next host. And Eddie's mainly going along with this because at first him and Carnage needed each other to survive, but aside from that, Eddie figured if he remained as Carnage's host, then he could just use Carnage to go after terrible people. But now it's only getting more complicated because Carnage wants to go after more powerful people, or at least someone who falls more in line with Carnage's morals. But nonetheless, when this brought the two of them to Bushwhacker, this blew Bushwhacker's cover, because for some time he had been laying low as Detective Brentwood, so he could basically go after the targets he wanted to and get away with it. But after the whole precinct saw that he wasn't who he said he was, Bushwhacker went off and he took out everyone who was there, which now has Eddie like, okay, I might have taken some lives in the past, but Bushwhacker, he's a monster, because he spared no one in this police station. He took out the cops, the people in custody, others who were just here looking for help. He spared no one. And Carnage finds Eddie's perspective to be amusing, because the Carnage is like Eddie's just rationalizing the comparison to make himself seem like a better person, which then has Eddie telling Carnage to shut up, but you know, as long as they're bonded, Carnage gonna have something to say. And when Eddie asks Bushwhacker why did he do this, he tells Eddie, well, Mr. Brock, I've been a cop for a while now, means I've seen plenty of criminals up close. Most of them are morons. That's why they get caught. But the smart ones, the ones who tend to slip away, they've all got something in common. They don't leave witnesses. Oh, and you know what? That includes you, Eddie Brock. So he just starts letting off shots on Eddie Brock Carnage. But keep in mind, Eddie and Carnage aren't as powerful as they used to be. So as they're catching all this heat, Carnage is quick to tell Eddie like, hey, yo, kill him. This hurts. And it has Eddie asking Carnage for a moment here, how many shots can you absorb? So Carnage is like, none of your business. You're driving the car, Eddie. I can't save us. You have to do it. You cannot let this second raider take us down, Eddie. We were gods. Have some pride for Knull's sake. Which is hilarious. That was a pretty good reference, Knull, damn it. But eventually this comes to the point where Bushwhacker runs out of ammo, which is unfortunate for him, and it's also one of the main reasons why Carnage doesn't use guns. But with Bushwhacker having no more ammunition in him, he then goes for a very smart move here, which starts with running in the other direction. And it's funny because Carnage is like, after him, Eddie, don't let him get away. And Eddie's just like, great advice, Carnage, thank you for that. So helpful. But as it turns out, Bushwhacker's not running away, but instead he's trapped himself in the ammo locker. And when this happens, Eddie knows that this isn't good, so he has to explain it to Carnage for a moment. Because Bushwhacker's a cyborg that was designed to be a living weapon. His arms can turn into any gun he wants, and when he needs ammunition, he eats it. And this is Carnage like, you seem scared, Eddie. I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. And before you know it, Bushwhacker just blasts this huge door off the hinges. And at this point, he's eaten so much ammo to where now he is huge. And Bushwhacker's just like, oh, that's nice. Haven't let myself go this big in a while. Which is what you'd expect to hear from someone who's eaten more than they should. But around this time, Eddie lets Carnage know if they're gonna come out on top, they gotta fight smart. And because of the deal they made before, Carnage says here, whatever you want, Eddie, but if you run, I'll kill you before you take 3 steps. And then I'll take him. That was the deal, remember? I'm starting to like this guy too. So yes, you probably should be smart. Because keep in mind, Carnage is looking at a lot of these targets as potential hosts. So this puts the pressure on Eddie here to figure this out quick. And he actually does in a real clever way, because just before they get blasted, Eddie leaps inside of the ammo locker with Bushwhacker, because he's noticed that Bushwhacker's made himself too big to be able to get out, and he's also too big to go after him in this tiny little room. So he jumps on his back and he tells him, your eyes were bigger than your stomach. You ate too much, Bushwhacker, like a python that tries to eat a cow. And Eddie just keeps squeezing his head until pop goes the Bushwhacker. And after doing this, Carnage tells Eddie like, wait, you said he was a cyborg, so he might not really be done. And that's where Eddie's more or less like, you're right, good point. Let's make sure. So after that, they make sure to cut up this cyborg into little bushwhacklets. And sometime after this, we see Eddie make a call to Belly Bushkin, who we were introduced to back in issue 1, where between the two of them, Eddie's been working for her as a field reporter to provide information that she can use on her podcast. But in return, Eddie's been using her leads to hunt down these different killers because of his deal with Carnage. So Eddie calls her here after going silent for 2 weeks to let her know that her hunch on that Detroit cop was legit, because he was really a former CIA assassin who went by the codename Bushwhacker. And this all comes off as a shock to her because she hasn't heard from Eddie in a while. But he just goes on to let her know that he copied some files from Bushwhacker's desk and he's sending them over to her secure server. And I know some of you guys are going to flip out when you see one of the targets that Bushwhacker was eyeing. But either way, this leads to Bailey going off because everything surrounding Eddie is starting to go really crazy. Because first it was the plane crash and now he's stealing files from a cop. And it's like, man, little does she know that's only part of what's happened. When she asked Eddie what all this means and what is he doing, he doesn't go into much of any detail. He just tells her that he's doing his job and that he's doing what he has to do. But during this conversation, in Eddie's mind, Carnage is back there like a little kid because he's like, ooh, tell her that you want leads on killers with powers. So Eddie, of course, repeats that and he makes that request. So again, this is Bailey telling him, this is ridiculous. I hired you to give you a break and piss off my uncle. I don't want this. And I mean, I believe her uncle is Barney Bushkin from the Daily Globe, who at one point was J. Jonah Jameson's rival, but I'm not sure if that's who she's talking about here. But this just leads to Eddie going off here and saying, you hired me to find monsters. I'm delivering. I send you stuff most true crime reporters couldn't even dream of. I take all the risks. What do? Record your little podcast there in your safe little office? Now, are you going to send me those leads? Or, and right there, Eddie has to catch himself and he tells her, I'm sorry, it's been a stressful day. There's a lot on my mind. If you want me to quit, I'll quit. And that's where she tells him, no, it's just, are you working for me or am I working for you? Just before she hangs up. And this has Carnage like, she's a smart lady. Just before going on to tell Eddie how he did such a good job handling Bushwhacker. So Eddie just tells Carnage to shut up, you murdering demon, and he punches himself in the face, which only had Carnage like, now that's just stupid, even for you. But once again, this takes us into another one-on-one conversation between Eddie and Carnage, with Eddie being upset about all the people who died at the police station because they would all still be alive if Carnage didn't want Eddie to go after Bushwhacker. So Carnage tells Eddie here, you didn't pull the trigger, Bushwhacker did. He made the choice to kill those people. If you're looking for a way to absolve yourself, take refuge in that. The only person you killed was a terrible, awful, scary serial killer. Why, Eddie, from a certain angle, you're a hero. So once again, Eddie goes back to asking Carnage what happened to the passengers on the plane. Because ever since what we saw in issue 1, Carnage has been withholding this information as far as what happened when they were saving the passengers and Eddie blacked out. And Eddie even goes on to say here that he can live with what happened to Bushwhacker, but if all those people died on his watch, it's gonna be a problem. So basically Carnage tells Eddie to calm down and stop being a drama queen. You know, don't get your symbiote materials in a bunch. Just before he reveals to Eddie that those passengers are all still alive. But as far as sharing any details, Carnage is just like, they're all in a safe place. And they're all gonna stay there until Carnage decides to do something else with them or to them. And really the reason why Carnage did this was to use them as leverage. Because Carnage can only threaten to kill Eddie so many times before eventually Eddie's just like, you know what, go ahead, do it. But if it's other lives that are at stake, then that method's gonna be way more effective. And Carnage is very open about letting Eddie know this. And that just has Eddie like, you're the devil. And that's where Carnage takes off his hat and he says, no, Eddie, we're the devil. And he makes himself look like Eddie when he's saying it. And I can only imagine Eddie thinking like, man, how did I go from we are Venom to this? And sometime later, after Eddie falls asleep, it's here where Carnage tries to pull a fast one. And Carnage even sees here how Eddie's handcuffed himself to the bed because he doesn't want another incident where Carnage finds a way to take over when Eddie's not conscious. But the thing is, Carnage, he doesn't want to take Eddie's body and go out. But instead, Carnage wants to go deeper in and uncover the secrets that Eddie has locked away. And it's funny here because at first Carnage just tries to hack away at the chains and the lock, but even while Eddie's asleep, he's able to defend these secrets, which then leads to this hand just reaching out of Eddie's forehead and choke slamming Carnage, which Carnage says it's likely something Eddie learned from Venom. So next, Carnage just switches it up and he goes for the more subtle approach of just trying to pick the lock. And really for the time being, this just gives us a preview of what Carnage is working on in the background. And right after this, things get a little crazy here. Because when we go back to Bailey Bushkin, who's looking at all the information Eddie provided from the files that he took from Bushwhacker, which were basically murder journals, but it basically gives her a look at all the people Bushwhacker wanted to kill. And among these people, Bushwhacker had a real hatred for artists, musicians, painters, you name it. But his next target, who's another serial killer, it's someone who many had believed to have been dead. And that person is Muse. And I gotta tell you, man, if Muse gets put on the next list, that she sends to Eddie as far as serial killers to look into, I kinda got a feeling that Carnage is gonna like this guy a lot. And that might just be a problem. But as Bailey's looking through these files, she hears a knock on the door, which is the last thing you want to hear when you're in the middle of watching Daredevil Born Again on Disney+. So she goes to take a look and see who it is, and as it turns out it's FBI agent Winters, alongside of Misty Knight, who like we saw back in issue 2, these guys are looking for Eddie Brock. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, and let me know what do you think is going to happen if Muse crosses paths with Eddie Brock Carnage. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.